it's calling for a reshaping of policies and a reshaping of society to be a more stakeholder-oriented society than a shareholder society, but no one is willing to show the political will to actually do that. So that goes back to my point on cooperation. Who is going to be pushing that agenda, and how can governments, but also societies, engage in more democratic ways to push this agenda towards a fairer, more equitable society? What are your views on that? And maybe also bringing the debate to the more macro level. What can be done at each in each organization? What can we do as leaders and in the context of ISPIM in general, as innovation leaders and innovation managers? What is within our control for us to change the world in such a way?
So I really want to hear about the micro thing, but before we go to the micro thing, can I just have a macro thing for my fellow panelists? I kind of feel that many of these things that we've been discussing are hamstrung by limiting our imagination to the way things are currently working. I haven't heard any kind of suggestions in Australia along the lines of Michael Hudson in Washington Post on having a debt jubilee of everything that's incurred during the pandemic, or that David Graeber mentioned that we could do this. I mean, it's not like you can't do it. It's been done. Human societies in history have done debt jubilees, and they've worked. So I'm wondering if there is any willingness on having a little bit of an out there idea in the current discourse, as opposed to just trying to figure out how we can get by this within the current frame of mind.
Andrew?
Well, a debt jubilee sounds good to me, but you need to figure out who's going to, what that liberation will mean for the people that have the debt, and what that will mean for the people to whom they own the debt. What I guess we've been trying to model and have seen both established here, if you like, social business, social enterprise, is where there is the opportunity for people, no matter what their circumstances, to use their own innate entrepreneurialism to start their own self-employment option, their own business. And we've seen this with people from very vulnerable communities. But the innovation that's needed there is the people that I've worked with in London that now run their own businesses, that have their own businesses, who came from highly marginalised and disadvantaged backgrounds, can't access ever the finance needed to kick it off. So the innovation that I discovered without even looking for, deliberately thinking it through, was that for a whole sector of our society who are in debt and who can't get ahead, perhaps one of the ways in which they can move forward is to be given the opportunity to use their innate entrepreneurialism, start their own self-employment or small business, which then employs others. But they actually need the finance up front to do it. Not big money, but we had, there's 65 members of a particular innovation hub in Wembley, in London. All of them are on a financial support package. All of them come from highly disadvantaged backgrounds. And at this stage, 75% of them have opened and are operating their new business after 2 years. Each one of them got a financial support package, which actually came from the philanthropic and the local government sector. That's the kind of, if you want to talk about where do you inject your capital, where do you inject your finance, that at least to me seems to be one possible opportunity for new money to be applied in a different way, which, believe you me, is very hard to find, especially for people who live from day to day and don't have a multitude of resources, but who come from a variety of backgrounds where they do have the skills, whether they're migrants, refugees, or people from all sorts of long-term disadvantaged communities. They do have the innate strengths and qualities to bring about their own future. They just need that initial injection. So it's a bit like a debt jubilee, but it's a kind of reverse debt jubilee in the sense that it's taking the risk, if you like. This isn't new. The Grameen Bank, of course, which people may know about, does microfinance, but we need more of it in our context, I think, if we're really going to address some of our first world poverty in the context and look for a fairer and more just society, say, in Australia.
So Alex, in taking the perspective of the global context, there's an increasing appetite for impact investing, socially responsible investment and the likes. But how is it in Australia? What is already out there, and what's the readiness, what's the appetite, both of the markets, but also what are the framework conditions from the policy perspective there to actually enable that?
We have one of the biggest asset pools in Australia globally. With the super sector, it's a multi-trillion business, and it's with the industry funds being a large share of it. We have a pretty hefty representation as well of the unions in this decision. It's a good and a bad thing. That's always the same. It's a blessing and a curse. You may say there is involvement. On the other side, the union definitely needs and delivers for their clientele as well. It's not always an all-over approach to everything. So the asset pool is here. The super sector is still growing and is heavily growing in Australia. I think that's a good thing. So whether it's the public or the super sector, if they could guarantee loans to the people you mentioned, Andrew, and that doesn't mean that they need that. If a large business basically, or a large super fund, or the government guarantees a credit to a bank, that doesn't mean that the cash needs to flow, because if the business is successful, it's just a guarantee. If the business is not successful, it will actually call the guarantee. It may be relatively cheap for the government. And I think we could do that, what you're saying, and we could do that in a larger scale, whether publicly funded or funded by the private sector. That's one point. The second point, what is really important, and I keep saying it again, all the social security and the pension, because we are so proud with, we have the gig economy, we have entrepreneurship, etc. A lot of these people, they miss out on all what we created the past 50, 60 years of social welfare. That means that you have a social security, and when you retire, whenever you want, we may need to be a little bit more flexible in the future, but whenever you can make a living. Most of these people cannot save money, and we need to make sure that they don't end up in Centrelink, because that's absolutely appalling from a human being perspective if you need to go there and ask for money. Let's be honest. So that's something that needs to be factored in, and whether the step of the casual employees that need to be offered proper jobs now after a year or stuff like that. These are decisions in the right direction to make sure that you have the flexibility of the gig economy, but you have the benefits of a normal employment, of a corporate or a government employment. And I think policy making needs to go in this area, flexible, but a super solid safety net, because the safety net is not the traditional corporate. Also, the safety net doesn't need to be provided only for the normal corporate job, because the normal corporate job, that may apply to 2/3 of the society, and the third may miss out on these benefits. And I think policy making needs to get these trends right. That's my take. And basically support startups. So I would say it's not about investing only, it's really about guaranteeing, because the big banks, let's be honest, the big banks in every country, they are the money distributing machines of the reserve banks. They are not that independent anymore, because they get the funding from the reserve bank, and by the policy that is set, they decide basically who gets credits. So they are almost like an utility. I used to be in banking, and I would not have enjoyed to hear that, but a bank today is boring as a telecom or an utility. It's basically infrastructure and helps to distribute money. Sorry. But Andrew, I would like to hear your a little bit your takes, because you are closer. I'm dealing with some social enterprises as well, but not to the degree like you are dealing with them. So how do they cope when it's about accessing capital and about having these benefits? Where are we at compared UK, Australia as well?
I mean, the reality is that for most social enterprises, they need a mixed revenue stream. Obviously, the more they can increase their income from trade, the more viable they will become. But given the nature of a social enterprise at startup stage, there will always need to be some kind of grant funds or some kind of injection of funds. Unfortunately, here in Australia, as well as in the UK, access to investment funds for startup social enterprises is extremely difficult to come by. Obviously, no one wants to invest in something that's not proven yet. So all the challenges still remain, a bit like any small enterprise that's starting up. But there's increased challenges, obviously, if you want to focus on a social impact, or if you want to set up a social enterprise that primarily employs people that have a range of different challenges. So all I can say is at the moment, and I'm still sorting it out, we've been back for about 6 months, I'm still looking at what's here in Australia, but access to startup finance for social businesses, social enterprises, is still very, very difficult to access in this country. And one of the challenges that we'd want to look at in terms of, a future fairer and more just post-COVID society.
So definitely a call for action.